Each day in our parishes and congregations, there are families that are suffering severe physical violence. So the action and the time that we take together today, I hope will enable you to be able to take steps that can help save lives. Recently, a young mother in Prince George's County was beaten by her husband, kicked and punched, and she fell as she was being hit. She tried to call 911. She fell unconscious, but 911 actually came. They looked up her address, they came and they rescued her. She was taken to the hospital. Coming out of the hospital, she went to get her little baby who had been there when her husband had beaten her so severely. She picked up her little baby and she went to her church. And then her church was St. Camilla's. And at St. Camilla's, we've done workshops with the Franciscan friars, with the staff, with volunteers, and they knew how to welcome her and provide her with support and encouragement. They gave her emergency food, emergency assistance with transportation. She didn't know about protection orders. And that day, they helped to save the life of that young woman because as she told us, she said she was afraid the next time he would kill her. So today we're going to increase our understanding of domestic violence and increase our ability to help save lives. I'd like to introduce myself to you. I have the good fortune to work with Monsignor Ensler at Catholic Charities in our domestic violence outreach program. I'm also the manager of our Parish Partners program. We provide emergency assistance. We visit parishes and visit with families who are suffering not only domestic violence, but domestic violence or rental emergencies or utility emergencies, homelessness, mental health issues. I also have had the opportunity to work in domestic violence shelters on a domestic violence hotline. I've also had the wonderful opportunity to work as a pastoral associate and have worked with families in a parish setting, many families who are suffering domestic abuse. I've had the blessing to be invited to be part of 2 conferences of the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops and to present in workshops at those conferences. So let's look at our agenda for today. In the next 40 minutes, I want to help all of us, to remind all of us how we could recognize domestic violence, how we can respond appropriately, and how can we make good referrals? What are the local resources available right now that could help families in your congregations? I'd like you to know the key elements of the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops' recommendations, because they are wonderful steps that would apply to any congregation about how parishes can best respond when families disclose that they're suffering abuse. Now, today is part 1 of a 2-part series, so I hope you'll come back in October. In October, we're going to delve into what are the warning signs that a domestic violence murder might occur in a family that discloses they're suffering abuse. And we're also going to look at what are the lethality risks that families who are suffering, what do they think are the most important concerns? But that will be continued in October. The information and work that I'm bringing to you today is guided by a priest advisory committee at Catholic Charities, led by our own Monsignor John Ensler. Many of you may know him, and an additional group of priests that include Father Joe Callis, Father John Dillon, and other pastors. And they have given us wonderful direction. And as a result, we do training with teachers and parish staff and pastors about domestic violence. We have a resource packet that you could download from our website at catholiccharitiesdc.org/familypeace. And I'll give you more about that later. But we developed a series of materials, a pastor's packet, resource cards for each county, bulletin inserts, prayers of the faithful. So we have a wealth of information that you could use to educate your parishioners, people attending your church, about where help is available. Because one reason that people die in domestic violence situations is they didn't know that there was help available. They never knew that counseling, shelter, protection orders were available to help them. So all of the work that we do is guided by a document from the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. I highly recommend it to you here. You can see when I call for help, and it establishes some important goals. The church is saying that as people come forward and disclose, the first goal is safety. Safety for the woman or man suffering abuse, safety for those children. The church also calls people who are abusive to become accountable and recognize their own responsibility and take steps to change their behavior. The church calls us to help if it's possible to restore the relationship, but knowing that many times after there's been severe violence and threats and abuse, it is not possible to restore the relationship. And so we can help families that are mourning the loss of that relationship. Now, you and I are in the category of first responders. So the bishops are calling us as first responders to first listen. Listen and believe. And notice it doesn't say, tell the woman to go back home, or tell the woman to leave, or tell the man who's being abused to leave or to stay. Our first job as responders is to just listen and believe the story of whoever is choosing to disclose with us. And then the bishops recommend that we help assess the danger to the family. And that's why this is a two-part workshop that we'll be talking more about that next month. And the bishops also recommended that we refer to counseling and specialized programs. And as part of my slides today, I have information about the best resources in Prince George's County, DC, and in Montgomery County ready for you. But sometimes we don't have our office, all of our resource sheets with us. So I want to ask you to take a moment right now. Your first step in becoming ready to serve families experiencing domestic abuse is to take down this number. Let's put this 800 number into your cell phones right now. Because if you're talking to an aunt, let's say you're talking to your auntie in Cleveland, or your grandmother in Baltimore, or you're talking to someone in your own community, but you don't have the resource list. I keep this number in my cell phone because I know wherever I am, 24 hours a day, we can call that number and they will connect us with the best local programs that can help us. So that number is 1-800-799-7233, our first step in being ready to help families that are suffering domestic abuse. I wanted to let you know that at Catholic Charities, we serve a similar area where you are in Montgomery, Prince George County, and DC. And we are receiving referrals of church families, of Catholic families that are experiencing. Dear friends, it would be very helpful if we could all mute ourselves as I go through this presentation, because those phones are bound to ring. So if everyone could please mute yourself, that'll be very helpful as we go forward. But at Catholic Charities, we are seeing families referred to us by our pastors who are experiencing threats to be killed, that the father or mother is threatening to kill the spouse and the children. We've seen domestic violent murders, threats or actions related to suicide. We've seen people so beaten up that they're hospitalized after the violence. The violence, I'm just speaking with a pastor today in a case where the violence extends to the children. So we have to make a report to Children's Services to try to protect the children who are often abused just as the mother or father is being abused. We see cases of spying and controlling, which is also a factor in the case I'm working on today. We help families that have been choked, and many who don't realize that the neck is so fragile that if your partner has already tried to choke you, you're in great danger, risk of being killed the next time. We have families that are suffering violence against pets. We had a pastor call us, a young couple, just married, young woman has become pregnant, all that joy that they're sharing together, but they've had an argument. In the midst of the argument, the young father, or to be father, father to be, hits her cat. Damaging the family pet is a way of threatening that I will hurt the innocent in my family. And these families are in great need of our assistance. We can make a big difference for them. And dear friends, this is a great time to mute yourself. If you're just joining us, please mute yourself. The reality of domestic violence is that it is present in our parishes, in our communities where we live and work. 1 out of 4 women, 1 out of 7 men have suffered severe physical violence at the hands of their loved one. And this means that they were kicked, beaten, choked, burned, intentionally burned, or having a weapon, knife, or a gun used against them. Think for a minute about the families coming to church this coming weekend. Will there be 1,000 families that come to your masses over the weekend? If there are 1,000 families that come to your church this weekend, it's possible that 250 of the women coming into your church, the mothers, daughters, sisters, cousins, 1 out of 4 have suffered severe physical violence in their lives. Now, some of those women have left that abusive relationship. Some of the women are still in the abusive relationship and come to church, but in church they present as loving families, very respectable and loving, but at home there's great violence and suffering. If you combine the rate of sexual violence, stalking, and physical violence all together, as we look out over our congregations, our parish at Mass, we could have 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3 women who have experienced sexual violence, stalking, physical violence, domestic abuse at home. And another way to look at this is that during the Vietnam War, if you think back to all the protests in the streets about the loss of American soldiers and the violence there, there were approximately 58,000 American soldiers that died in the Vietnam War. And that this was horrific suffering on the part of the nation. During those same years, 54,000 women, mothers, daughters, cousins, aunties, and grandmothers, 54,000 women were murdered at home by their loved ones in those same years. So you and I, by learning more about this and educating our parish community, we can try to reduce that number of the amount of terrible violence and murder in our own parish families. And even at Catholic Charities, we recently suffered the death of one of our staff people. She was in an abusive relationship. We did not know that. And she tried to separate from her husband, and then he killed her and killed himself. So even we at Catholic Charities have suffered this terrible violence among our staff. I would like to share with you a true story. Originally, I developed this story as a presentation tool, but as I have had the opportunity to give this presentation, people have come forward to me and said that this is their story. This is their story. So on behalf of the family in DC, that shared with me that this was their story, and also a family in Montgomery County, I present to you Lisa's story. Now, Lisa is not the name of either of these families, but just to share with you what happened to Lisa. On the screen, you see some squares, and many of us have the things that are in these squares, right? We have friends, we have family, we have freedom of movement, we have mental health. Let's see what happens as I share with you the experience of Lisa to the support that often enables families to thrive. What's going to happen to Lisa? Lisa is a professional teacher, and she's married to a young, handsome professional, and they fell in love, and they had 2 children, and Lisa thought, that they would have a long and happy life together. But in the beginning years of their marriage, when Lisa wanted to chat with one of her girlfriends on the phone, or she, asked if it would be okay, would there be, she tried to arrange time to have lunch with one of her friends. Her husband was very jealous. He did not like it when she was on the phone with her friends. He accused her of cheating on her. She wasn't cheating on her. She just wanted to talk with her girlfriends. But in order to avoid problems with her husband, to avoid his threatening her and threatening that he was going to hurt her if she was cheating on him, she stopped associating with her friends. So as you can see, I've let that box disappear now on the screen. When Lisa met her husband, she had a very good relationship with her family, strong relationship with her parents and her sister. But her husband lied to her family about her, accusing her of being mentally ill, of being abusive. He presented himself very professionally and compassionately, as if, and said he was the one saving the family. He was saving the children from her abuse. So at a time when he beat her, and Lisa called her parents for help, and her sister, they turned her down. He had successfully separated her from the support of her family. When they met, when they first started their family, they were both working. But her husband sometimes beat her, and she would have bruises, so she wouldn't go to work. Sometimes he would threaten to beat her if she tried to leave for work and she wouldn't go to work. If she was at work, he would call and harass her. What are you doing? Where are you? He would harass her boss. She lost her job. The same thing repeated. He would threaten her, he would beat her, he would harass her at work. She lost another job. She stopped working. Lisa had some savings. They had a joint bank account. But he decided he was going to take the savings out and make some renovations in their house. He did that. They emptied Lisa's savings. At the same time, he went into their joint bank account and took out all the money. So now Lisa has no contact with her family or her friends. She's not working and she has no savings. And there's no division, equal division, or discussion about how money is going to be spent from his salary. She literally begs for money for food for the family. And she and the children are hungry. And sometimes when she begs, he beats her for asking. He also tells her she's fat and ugly and all sorts of insulting things, no one would ever love her, and that she has to get his permission before she eats or drinks anything, even if he's not home. If he comes home and thinks that she has had even a cup of tea and didn't ask his permission, he will beat her. She has a bad back and had medicine, pain medicine, and he took away her medicine. And he just said, grow up. And right now, she doesn't have health insurance, she doesn't have money, she doesn't have savings, and she doesn't have medical care. And with all this trauma, and believe you me, by now she's experiencing trauma. She's been physically injured, she's been emotionally injured, she's feeling confused, she's having difficulty making plans, she's suffering great anxiety. And she forgot to renew her driver's license. And this was back at a time where you actually had to present yourself in person, to make that renewal. And he refused to take her. So now she's no longer driving anywhere and not using the family car. Every day coming home from work, he grabs her cell phone and checks what web pages she went to, what phone numbers she called. He calls back anyone who called her and says, why did you call my wife? Lisa does not use her cell phone anymore because she does not want to be beaten at the end of the day. One day, he says, I'm going to take the kids to the beach, but you're not to come. Lisa accepts that. He's going to take the kids to the beach for a day and come back. But actually, he goes away and he's gone. He's gone for a week. He's gone for another week, and she loves her children. She's a very good mother. She's frantic. She's concerned. He comes back and he says, if you ever leave, if you ever tell anyone what's happening in this house, I will get custody. And says all sorts of demeaning things to her about her mental health and her body, and demeans her. And she doesn't realize that as a mother, she has equal rights to custody of those children. So she becomes afraid that if she ever left or if she ever told anyone, she would never see those children again. And then at the end of, as he goes to work, he begins to put a little piece of paper right above the door. He shuts the door. He puts a little paper there on the door and he tells her, that piece of paper better be there when I get home or you'll be sorry. Lisa never uses the phone, never talks to any friends, never calls her family, never goes out, never opens the door. But sometimes the wind takes that piece of paper and pushes it off, and he comes home and he beats her up, and she ends up in the hospital. And at this moment, she has lost her freedom of movement, her mental health, her physical safety. And what is left? What is left? I hope, in your case, for families like Lisa, that the church is there for them. And in Lisa's case, in a very similar situation, I had the opportunity to help her. Her church was there. And when she came out of the hospital and was in a domestic violence shelter, and then her church helped her with a rent payment, helped her with food, helped her get into a women's Bible study, which was designed to help women who are being abused. But that women came to the church, we had childcare. The church can be a lifesaver. I've seen this a number of times where it is only where at the church where someone can ask for help. And let me ask you a question. At your church, is there any sign in your bathroom that resources are available? There could be. At Catholic Charities, we have a downloadable restroom sign. You could download and put up in the wet restroom stalls. We have posters, we have bulletin inserts. There could be information at your church that could help save Lisa's life. Now, I'd like to have a little conversation with you looking at this slide. This slide is a good summary. Let me just check my time here. This slide is an excellent summary of what domestic violence is. On the outside, there is physical violence. It may also be sexual violence. The goal of all of this violence is power and control. And then the spokes of the wheel, as we saw with Lisa. Let me ask you, this is a point at where I'd like to ask you, invite you to unmute. And I want to ask you, what spokes of the wheel did Lisa experience? What part of domestic violence did she experience? So let's look at the top two, coercion and threats and intimidation. Can anyone unmute and tell me, in what way did Lisa suffer threats, violence, or intimidation?
Oh, I think, Laura, you laid out the case very well for that, going through the scenario of how she lost one thing at the after the other, beginning with her friends, her family, and the threat of resuming any of those relationships was she was coerced against that.
Definitely, definitely. Let's look at emotional abuse. What could anyone suggest? What type of emotional abuse? And it says putting her down, making her feel bad about herself. In what way did Lisa suffer some emotional abuse? I think everyone's a little bit shy today, but calling her ugly and fat and requiring her to ask for permission to eat anything is emotional abuse.
Right.
Accusing her of cheating is emotional abuse. Of course, there's emotional abuse with all the threats as well. Um, let's look at isolation. This is a very good example of the kind of threats that cause isolation. Lisa suffered isolation. She couldn't talk to her friends. She couldn't talk to her family. Remember, he interfered with her going to work. Part of the goal of that is also to separate her from anyone who would give her information or who would help her. Minimizing and blaming. As he is beating her, he's telling her, I'm beating you because you're cheating. I'm beating you because you're fat. I'm beating you because you ask for money. He's blaming her and not taking responsibility for forgiving her for whatever she's doing that he's upset about. He's not practicing forgiveness, but he'll be insisting, of course, that she forgive him for beating her. But he's minimizing blaming. Using the children. We look at that spoke on the wheel, using the children to hurt her. The threat, that beach trip was very designed to say to Lisa, don't you talk to anyone, don't you leave me, or you'll never see your children again. And sometimes we also see threats to kill the children. Economic abuse. Lisa suffered the loss of her savings, separation from her job. The joint bank account was wiped out. He did not share any of his money with her. So if you go to the last spoke on the wheel there, male privilege, he established a male privilege that he controlled her, that he controlled the money, instead of what we're called to in a mutual loving and sharing relationship. So as we're aware of the multifacet of violence, if someone comes to you and says, you know, my husband is yelling at me, he's accusing me of cheating, I can't come to this meeting, or I won't be able to come to this meeting because I have to ask my husband for permission. That can be an alert to you if you see any part of this wheel, that the whole wheel, there are other spokes of the wheel that may occurring at the family, in the family as well. And at the church, what we often did is we would just set that family into a higher priority. If we know that they're experiencing any abuse in this circle, we would try to serve them more than any way that we could help them, to try to eliminate the isolation. At least they could have contact with us in the parish office. One of the interesting and very difficult situations is that as we try to help families, and I'd like to invite you to ask a question of people. If you ever have the opportunity to help someone who's suffering, please ask this question. What step would you like to take to feel safer?
Mhm.
What step would you like to take to feel safer? And listen, and then try to help them take those steps. But understand that if today a young woman or man comes to you for help, they're at a certain place in this cycle of violence. Let's say that the violence just occurred and they just got out of the hospital. So they just are exiting from the violence. Next week, they may be in a different part of the cycle. And I hope that for all of us, we can pray for patience and kindness, that as people go through the cycle of violence, that we can be there and allow them to maintain contact with us at the parish or the church, no matter where they are in this cycle. So an example is that we had a young woman who came to a parish, and I was called to assist the volunteers. And her husband had threatened her with a kitchen knife to kill her. He had been raping her, forcing her to painful sex. He was threatening to kill her. So at that time when she came to us, she was very afraid that he was going to kill her. And she had bruises. We took pictures of her bruises. He had really hurt her already. And and next month, we're going to look at the warning signs of how you might tell if a domestic violence murder might occur. And so she had some of those signs. We were very worried for her, and we gave her information. We gave her some emergency financial assistance. We told her about protection orders. She was very worried about custody of her 2 children. And she took that information and she went to the House of Ruth. She went to the courthouse. We actually helped her get a protection order. Now, that was in the phase right after the violence. But then in the honeymoon phase, her husband, who was arrested, called her from jail and told her so many lovely things, that he would never do this again, that he wanted to be reunited with his family again, that he loved her and the children. And his family called her and said the same thing. And they both begged her to please pay the bail so that he could come out, and he promised he would never hurt her again, and he would go back to earning his wage and be able to support the family. So now then she calls us and she says to me, my husband says he loves me, and what should I do? He wants me to pay the bail. What should I do? So I recognize that now she's in the honeymoon phase. And if you have a faithful person in front of you who believes that God has a plan for their life, and that plan that God has for their life included her husband, and that God would not want her to leave her husband, and that God would want her to forgive, and her husband's begging for forgiveness, then she may accept him and go back into that relationship. And one of the things we can do at the church is begin to talk about what is, when you are begging forgiveness for an action, what should you be doing in addition to saying, I'm sorry? So that people can know that that saying I'm sorry is not a sufficient condition to risk being killed. And in fact, I'm working with a pastor right now in a situation where there's been great violence in the family. And it's very appropriate at times to simply help people mourn that there's such high risk of murder, that we'll support you if you decide to separate. We'll support you if you decide to go back, but we'll support you if you decide to separate. So in the honeymoon phase, what I said to her was, and I advise all of us, we should not be telling people what to do. We do not know how dangerous it is. They do. But we can remember the danger, because in that moment of honeymoon, they may be forgetting that he held a kitchen knife to her and threatened to kill her with it. So when she asked me for advice, she said, what should I do? I said, my dear, you have the wisdom within yourself to know what is best for your family. You will have to make this decision. I do remember that you were afraid he was going to kill you with a kitchen knife. So I will remember their own concerns, their own words, and share that back, but I will not tell her what to do. If we tell her what to do and she does the opposite, she may never come back to the church. And I've had the opportunity to work with many church families who've stayed or who have left. And in both cases, our parish was very supportive of both of them. I am advocating for safety and talking with people about what step would you like to take to be safer. I'm concerned about your safety. And let's go on here. So if a woman goes back, if she had paid the bail and he had come out of jail and they'd lived together again, there would probably be some happy moments. And her dream of having her God-ordained marriage and life, she would hold on to that hope. She would hold on to that hope. Now, the bishops say that it is the violence that breaks a marriage, not a woman who's seeking safety. A woman should seek safety for her children. But if a woman goes back, there'll be maybe a calm period, and then maybe the tension's going to increase. And unfortunately, what we see in the cycle of violence is that the violence increases and increases as the cycle repeats. So if he's choked you before, if he's held a gun or a knife to you before, unfortunately, We can say to people in our experience, women and men who've experienced this level of violence, oh, I'm concerned for you that it may be worse the next time. So where is she in the cycle of violence? And we want to help you at whatever point you are. Now, when she's in that cycle of violence, she's going to ask her mom what to do. She's going to ask her auntie, maybe her grandmother. And on the left, these are things that Catholic and religious families have said to women and men suffering abuse. But I hope that's not what we are going to teach in our parishes and in our church. The education that you do, if you do workshops, if you put out information, you could change what the auntie and the grandmother say. So let's look at this. I actually had a Catholic leader say this to me. You shouldn't be tabling here. You should just tell those women to go home, pray, and obey. But look at what the response should be. The person hurting you is responsible for his acts of violence. This is not your fault. God is calling us to mutual service and love. The bishops, in their wonderful statement, when I call for help, say no person is expected to stay in an abusive marriage. Let's look at the next one. This is your cross to bear. Pray and God will help you endure this pain and suffering. I've also had a woman say to me, God's punishing me for my past sins, and I need to bear this cross. And we need to reassure our congregations, God is not asking any woman or man to bear such a burden, and that we're concerned for your safety. And if you, enduring the pain and suffering, may allow this to continue, instead, the person hurting you should seek God's guidance and counseling. Children have a right to grow up in a family. I can't leave him. They need their father. We had, I can think of other families that we know where a murder has occurred. But children who grow up in violence will repeat the violence that they view. They will be traumatized. They will have higher health risks because of that. So children, you can help your children by getting to a safer place. And of course, many churches, including Catholic churches, families will say to each other, your mother might say, divorce is a sin. That's not what the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops is saying. It's violence and abuse that break up a marriage. And if either of the spouses is causing such physical injury that the other one is in danger, they have a right to leave. They have a legitimate cause to leave. So I again want to recommend to you, when I call for help, this is a pastoral guide. It is full of some religious references that we can use, that when we're looking at Ephesians, and it says husbands should love their wives and wives should obey their husbands. There's more to that verse than is sometimes said. It's about mutual love. Wives are invited to obey their husband as he acts like Christ lived his life in a sacrificial, loving way for the church. And the bishops say that, they abhor the misuse of these biblical texts. Forgiveness. These are direct quotes from the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting abuse happened. Forgiveness is not permission to repeat it. One day I was in the parish office and a young father knocked on the door, and he came in and he said, you have to make my wife come back. Every 2 weeks he was getting drunk and beating her. And he himself was not practicing forgiveness. She might have done something that he didn't like. He would hit her and beat her. But he wanted the church to make her forgive him and come back. And I and the pastor, we just told him that was not going to happen. That he needed to be thinking about and taking responsibility for his own actions. Why did he think that his wife had left? So forgiveness is used to cause people to stay and stay and stay while abuse is happening. We had mentioned before that sometimes people feel that abuse is God's way of punishing one for past abuse. And that is not how the Catholic faith sees a loving and generous and loving God who wants safety and support for each family. And finally, in a very powerful statement, the Catholic bishops say no person is expected to stay in an abusive marriage. What you can do, we have tremendous materials available, and there are resources. There's so much that you can do at your parish. You can include information about domestic violence on your website, in your newsletter, and your bulletin. We have bulletin inserts ready to go that you could use. You could have a list of updated resources for your county that you put on your literature rack. We have that available. You could download it. And I say download it and it'll have the Catholic Charities logo on it. If you like that, fine, you can use it. But if you're from a different denomination and you like our materials, I'd be happy to send them to you and you could just change the logo. You could have people in your parish go through some training. This summer and next year, we'll be offering training for parish leaders on domestic violence. That's once a month, one time a month through the summer months to get ready for fall outreach. October is Domestic Violence Month, so you could do a special tabling or outreach or have an announcement after Mass. Ask your parish pastor to do a homily. We have homily tips that we put out. And this Sunday, last Sunday was a good one, and next October 3rd is a great Sunday for talking about domestic violence because of the readings. At the parish where I worked, we would include discussions about domestic violence in baptism classes. We have marriage prep materials that have to do with what are signs of an abusive relationship. And we have parishes that are taking collections. Our Lady of Mercy takes a collection for Jacada every year. Our Holy Family Mitchellville did a Halloween fundraiser for the Community Crisis Center in Prince George's County. So those are all helpful. And here's my website. It's catholiccharities.org, Family Peace. All this information is downloadable. And here's my email. I'd be glad to talk with you if you'd like to have our material or borrow it or use it in any way that would help families in your parish. And I want to tell you a little bit about some excellent resources that are available to help you right now. The Jewish Coalition Against Domestic Abuse has a specially focused counseling ministry. They have about 20 counselors. They do domestic violence counseling free for adults and also for teenagers that are in abusive relationships. They do safety planning. They have legal assistance. This is a fantastic resource because in parish settings, I've often encountered families that were not ready to call the police, not ready to go for a protection order, but this is not this is not police. This is a free counseling service that can help families, and they do telehealth and phone counseling and phone safety planning. So this is a wonderful resource, and they serve Montgomery, Prince George, and DC. So I highly recommend them to you. And if you ask Betty or Meg for a copy of the slides, then you'll have all these resources. I have a whole resource page for DC, but I don't have time to go through each of these resources. But again, I believe Meg or Elizabeth can send out the slides for you. You can also download the same material from our website at catholiccharities.dc.org, Family Peace. So we have similar wonderful, wonderful resources in Montgomery County, in Prince George's County, wonderful resources. And I just wanted to show you that next month on October 27th, I look forward to talking with you again. I'm going to talk with you about the warning signs that a domestic violence or murder might occur so that you can be alert to that. I'm also going to talk with you about how women and men suffering abuse have their own risk assessment that they're doing. And if we know about that, then we can be better able to help them. And remember this wonderful question. If someone discloses to you, what step would you like to take to feel safer? What step would you like to take to feel safer? And here are some resources that can help you. I'm concerned for your safety. These are the most wonderful things that we can do. And again, here at the final slide, you can see my email, you can see our website. And I again thank Betty and Meg for this opportunity. And I'm going to stop sharing. Well, maybe I'll just leave this for a moment in case people are writing down any of this information. And notice again at the bottom is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And I want to stay for a few minutes and answer, give you the opportunity to ask a question.
Laura, thank you so much that was just wonderful information and both chilling and staggering. But if I don't want to interrupt any questions that someone might have for Laura, but you can also enter into this chat if you don't want to come off mute. I'd be happy to relay it.
I would just like to reiterate Meg's thankfulness for Laura. You certainly opened our hearts and minds to how to effectively engage with somebody who has been vulnerable enough to disclose this situation in their life, and to how to keep them on a lifeline and not inadvertently shove them into a corner because of our inappropriate kind of help. So I think you really helped to frame the steps that we need to take as first responders, and to maintain that trusting relationship while somebody navigates very difficult situations.
And again, for everyone who's Catholic, the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops, you can read their statement when I call for help on their website. And those from other congregations, there are interfaith materials at Faith Institute that have wonderful domestic violence resources. And your own congregation probably also has wonderful resources, might have a domestic violence resource packet that would have inspiring messages appropriate for your congregation as well, about helping our families and friends that are, and I think the most important thing is to remember, no matter what we think a person should do, oh, they should leave, oh, they should stay, that we set that aside and that we focus on listening, and we say, what step would you like to take to feel safer? I'm aware of some resources. Could we call them together? Let's make a call to Jacada. I know they do safety planning. I'm concerned for your safety. What step would you like to take to feel safer? Now that's the key question that we can offer people. So thank you everyone for coming and for being concerned. And I just hope that you take the opportunity within your own parish to spread the information around, to share the information so that we can create a more supportive community for people who are suffering abuse.
Thank you so much for sharing all this. It opened all kinds of avenues that I never knew existed. I wish I'd known it when I was teaching. It would have been really an asset.
I'm going to take a moment to share a couple resources that we were fortunate to have some representatives as presenters here previously from the Family Justice Center in both Prince George and Montgomery County. I'm sorry, give me one moment and I will pull the right one up.
And those are both wonderful agencies. They try to do safety planning. They offer help with a protection order. They have advocacy that'll help you go into court. So those are just wonderful agencies.
This is the website for Prince George's County Family Justice Center. And in addition to sharing Laura's slides, I will send these links as well. This is the Montgomery County Family Justice Center. And essentially these are wraparound kind of smorgasbord of services that the Family Justice Centers provide in way of legal and social services and emergency help to take victims, through these many hurdles that they're facing. So just a couple other items to share of upcoming events. At Shenandoah University, coming up in November 10th, they are hosting both an in-person and virtual conference on integrating spirituality in today's healthcare. And again, it's November 10th. I will send that flyer when I send the slides that Laura has shared. In addition, the Alzheimer's Association is sponsoring a virtual education program September 24th in Spanish for healthy living for your brain and body. That will be by Zoom. And also, as far as upcoming conferences, the Health Ministries Association have their annual conference in October, and it's just was made virtual. It was going to be in person. So again, we will share that as well. Our friend Wendy Zimmerman, who is the Faith Community Nurse Coordinator up at Meritus Health in Hagerstown, Maryland, is beginning a Foundations of Community Nursing course in October and is still accepting applications for that. Again, I'll include that when I share the other information. So again, we are really grateful everyone was able to be here today and hear this very just compelling information about how we can all be more informed and better educated to respond to this crisis. But we'll very much look forward to Laura being back with us on October 27th. Same time, same WebEx channel, but I will send the links as reminders, and we'll very much look forward to that.
Meg, can it be shared later?
Yes, I will send the link again. Yes, absolutely.
We have retreat that day.
Absolutely. We'll be happy to. Anybody have any other events or, yes, go ahead, Gloria. Here,
You're
I think,
muted.
no, still can't hear.
Gloria, you're muted.
I'm not sure what's happening, Gloria. Do you want to send it in the chat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, it's good to see some familiar faces today.
And if you're looking for the chat, it's kind of on the well, on the bottom, there's more options, but then there's a chat box. It should be right next to it. I also just, reiterated that hotline number and just that very important question you emphasized, Laura, about a response to somebody in this kind of crisis, about what steps, do you want to take to feel safer? That's such a powerful thing to let them know that you're listening and not telling them what to do. I'll remember that. Okay. I'm gonna circle back with Gloria and find out so I can share it when I send out the other material after the meeting. Find out, yeah. Anybody else have anything, any upcoming events or news that they wanted to share? I'll put a plug in and also share that our program, are you guys seeing, let's see here. We continue to support the community vaccine effort. So if you have anybody you would like us to bring the vaccines to, a church, school, we pretty much go anywhere. So you can let me know at my email or at fcnprogram@holycrosshealth.org. I'll also include this link that includes our upcoming clinics and where they are, which gets updated regularly. So you'll have that as a resource.
Thank you.
All right. Well, once again, thank you, Laura, and thanks to everyone who was able to come today. And we'll look forward to October 27th to learn more. So have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.